session. Tonight we have present directors Tytler, DeFreitas, Ramirez, After, and myself, meaning we have a quorum. Thank you to our interpreter. Susanna, would you please share the interpretation instructions with our participants? And then we can turn on the interpretation function. Thank you. The first business in order is the approval of the agenda. Directors, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is our opening celebrations and updates by our superintendent, Dr. Anna Cole.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here or tuning in. A couple of celebrations this week. Want to extend a lot of gratitude to our finance and HR teams for the work around our 23-24 audit. We'll talk more about this tonight during the CFO's update, but really want to thank the finance team for the work in completing our piece of the audit. A big thanks to Catherine, Dave, and Crystal for really leaning into shifting practices around our quarterly and monthly reconciliations to be able to complete the quarterly reconciliations on a new schedule to really strengthen our work around transparency and accountability. And a big thank you to Begonia Platt, Chief Platt, and the HR and payroll teams for working diligently to get the open enrollment information entered into the system in time for payroll, and all the work that's happened with this mid-year open enrollment process as we've pivoted back to CEBT. So lots of gratitude for our operational teams. Want to also thank members of our newly formed Safe Haven Response Team, which is a group of volunteer teachers, support staff, administrators, Family Resource Center members, and staff who what brings this group together is that this is our staff members who work most closely with newly immigrated students and families. The purpose of this team is it's a dedicated group that will ensure that all students, regardless of immigration status, feel secure, supported, and valued within our schools. The team will proactively prepare for and respond to potential immigration enforcement policies, fostering a safe and welcoming environment for students and their families. And they'll do this work by reviewing and strengthening the implementation of the board's Safe Haven policy. And the team will safeguard student rights and promote trust within our school communities. So really grateful for Kelly Medina, Director of Student Family Services, and for all the staff who stepped up to be part of this work. And I'm really grateful for our teams and our community that we have this group of folks in position and getting organized to support students and families. Want to also thank members of the certified, classified, and admin interest-based bargaining groups who've identified members to serve on the Health Insurance Advisory Committee. As board members are familiar with, this is related to our collaborative bargaining contract, and this group is going to act as the negotiating team that is tasked in the contract to align on recommendations to the Board of Education regarding health insurance benefit plans for the 25-26 school year. So this team has the incredibly difficult task of trying to identify and recommend to you plan types within CEBT, contribution levels, and other details related to the 25-26 CEBT health plans in order to continually provide access to health insurance for employees while attempting to minimize the cost, which is nearly impossible in the current healthcare climate. Given the current district financial challenges. So you'll hear more about that tonight, but really want to thank this team. The group met last night and aligned on process that we'll make as it relates to decision making. The team discussed efforts to gather additional information about priorities from our employees around health insurance and aligned on next steps. So really grateful for the additional time Roaring Fork School District staff are investing in trying to tackle this challenge. I also want to celebrate that it took us a while to get it rolling because of schedules and the fall's really tricky. But we have now officially launched the Superintendent Student Advisory Council at every high school. So we've gotten through that first round of first meetings. And so I really want to thank the school leaders and staff from our deans and counselors and principals and APs who have supported and recruited students and help remind them of our lunch meetings. I know sometimes that gets lost in busy life of high school students. And they've done a phenomenal job recruiting students to participate in these advisory councils who truly reflect the socioeconomic, linguistic, racial, cultural, and gender diversity of their student populations. It has been an absolute privilege to sit and have lunch and listen to these students. And I cannot wait for this work to continue on a monthly basis throughout the rest of the year. A big thanks to Dr. Park and our ED of schools, Joel Hathaway, who have also participated in these meetings with me. Thanks to Sandra Ponce and the nutritional services team, which has made logistics incredibly easy because they are developing menus to cater the lunches for the students and administrators who are there at no cost to the district. So that's been awesome. And I know it's additional work for those teams. And so grateful for that. And most importantly, a ton of thanks to the students who are volunteering to serve on the Superintendent Student Advisory Council. They're giving up their lunch. They are engaging thoughtfully, critically, constructively in the conversations. They are sticking around after we meet to continue the conversation. They're sending me emails of things they forgot to say that they wanted to follow up on. And they're enthusiastically committing, as I have definitely recruited some of them to serve on some of our district committees. They've enthusiastically committed to continuing to serve on our Equity Advisory Council so that we have a more robust representation from across our district high schools. So a ton of thanks and big celebration to the students in that work to make that happen. And lastly, I really want to appreciate our Roaring Fork School District staff and especially our folks who are working directly with students in our classrooms, our certified teachers and our support staff. They're managing so much right now. Education professionals have monumental responsibilities and the scope of work is astounding in a normal year. What we ask teachers to do is substantial. And this is not a normal year. And it's clear to me in the conversations that I'm having with teachers, the outreach that staff are sending emails and asking questions about the budget challenges that we're facing. These are significant and they're causing an impact on our staff from everything from mild concern to significant stress and worry about job security, about salaries, about housing, about providing for their families. It ranges. Everybody's interpreting the information and the situation differently, but it's significant. And yet still our staff are showing up. They're volunteering to participate on advisory councils. They're coming to meetings. They're sending emails. They're asking questions. They're trying to understand the facts that are being presented. They're asking thoughtful questions and leaning in. And what's amazing is all of this is happening, and I'm very aware of it. We're very aware of it. And yet, when I met this week with like 15 Glenwood Springs High School students, and we asked, what's on your mind? Tell us about school. What's working? What's not working? Almost every student, one thing, budget was not on their mind. So it's really refreshing. The other thing was that every single student said something to the effect of, I love my teachers. The teachers at my school are incredible. And I have pages of notes and I have yet to actually share this feedback with Glenwood Springs High School. So I'm spoiling the gratitude, but every single student mentioned how they feel seen and welcomed and cared for. And that is a direct quote. From our students, because of the relationships they have in the classroom, they felt supported. They felt like they had help when they needed it. And so I just want to name the immensity of things that our staff are carrying, and yet they are showing up for students. They are present. They are keeping some of these concerns at the district level, and they're doing the work for kids that needs to be done and making sure that our environments are stable and safe and rigorous, and the kids are engaging and thriving. And I have no doubt that they're going to continue to do this good work through the break. And then I just hope that everyone really celebrates those 2 weeks of downtime. So just want to really send some gratitude to our staff and for all the things they're carrying right now and the astounding work they're doing to create amazing learning environments for kids, even with this whirlwind going on. It is amazing to see the students thrive. That's all I got.
Thank you. The next business in order is the superintendent report, which will include a strategic communications update from Dr. Cole and an employee opportunity fund update from Chief Platt.
All right, well, let's jump into a couple of formal updates. First, related to strategic communications, this is connected to components of our strategic plan around operational excellence and partnerships with families. And as the board is aware, this year, we eliminated the public information officer responsibilities from the role of the senior project manager and board secretary positions. Really, the reasons we did that was we wanted to make sure that the scope of work was doable. This shift resulted in initial cost savings, but not quite enough to hire a full-time public information officer. We determined that we would take this year to step back, to assess needs, and to provide other services that are needed that a PIO would support through contractors. And just as a context point, our current kind of staffing around communications is we have one full-time bilingual communications specialist who is responsible for managing the district website, the community and staff newsletters, and the implementation of the bilingual communications toolkit, which really is a lot more work than it seems. It really relates to certifying folks that then become official bilingual leads in our district, that are official interpreters that can interpret for complex meetings like individualized educational plan meetings, high profile school meetings. And so, there's a ton of work just to manage that plan. So that's our current staffing and communications. This isn't quite advancing. Okay. So what we did to address that gap of not having a PIO was we issued an RFP this fall for strategic communications support. It was pretty broad. We received 3 responses overall. We interviewed with contractors. And as this work was happening, so was the optics and the clarity around some of the financial issues that we were encountering as we've all been talking about for months. So as a result of, I think, a lot to do with our own capacity to manage this work and due to concern around the costs, we narrowed the scope of that initial RFP. And so we really continued to focus it for those reasons onto 2 specific things that we just want to update the board and the community about of how we're addressing this. So for our current scope right now, we have 2 very targeted, I would say kind of support areas. One is around strategic finance support and consultation. And so we've contracted with WR Communications, a PR firm, to help us with that work over the next couple months. And then we also were finalizing a contract and finalizing some pieces with O Communications around really wanting to finish the strategic plan components with the materials that we need to really share the finalization of our 2024-2029 strategic plan with our community. So those were 2 kind of chunks of work that we really wanted to make sure that we were still driving forward. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we highlight through this work and this work around communications is it's been clear to us as we've listened and heard from especially our Latinx families that the pieces and a lot of the components that we worked really hard on in the strategic plan that came from listening to kids and families and looking at our student data, the components that are part of our strategic plan as it lies now on the website, where it's been in board presentations, is not resonating, and folks aren't seeing the components of the strategic plan that speak to them and answer questions that say, how does the district care about my kids? What are you doing? And so in particular, we want to just lift up that some of the work that we'll be doing in partnership with contractors will be to develop materials that share with everyone the components of our strategic plan that support students' well-being and achievement. And specifically because our 24-29 strategic plan centers the needs of Latinx students and our emerging bilingual students, and because it reflects our commitment to addressing the achievement gap between Latinx and white students, we will be developing materials exclusively to address how the plan is tackling need. And so we will have materials that we'll be developing this winter that really articulate how we'll be advancing goals related to the rigorous education for all initiative to address the achievement gap between student subgroups. It'll also be highlighting how we're going to be strengthening parent partnerships through student-centered partnerships and the work there. And then finally, it'll lift up the components of thriving team that are really shifting the way that we think about teacher and staff recruitment and retention, with that goal of making sure that our faculty reflect the diversity of our students, because we know that that has direct impacts on student achievement and outcomes, in particular for students of color and emerging bilingual students. So just want to let the community know that, you know, our commitment to making sure that these plans are in place and that we're being accountable, and that we're also communicating the plans in ways that people feel are real and accessible and go further than just the website where they are right now, will be coming through this work with some of our contractors. So timelines on that. We're finalizing the pieces or the strategic communication consultation right now is set up to really be a very targeted supports from December through February. And then those strategic plan materials will have opportunities, again, to develop materials and have kind of iterative processes with our community. Did we get it right? Is this the story you need to hear from the plans we've developed? That work will happen in January, February, and we're expecting to have materials. When I say materials, I'm talking about like the posters that used to sit in this room with the strategic plan, those kinds of things, brochures, perhaps a refresh to the website, maybe videos to talk through these components of the plan.
Thank you.
I am bringing to you an update on the Education Opportunity Fund. We launched this program just last year, so we are now at a year of its completion. And we have had 3 application periods, one early January. We revised those applications in March, one at the very end of the spring last year for those that were going to be taking courses over the summer, and one over the summer that was the result of some pushes that we saw for some teachers enrolling into the late classes for fall. So over those 3 application periods, we received a total of 64 applications. I do have here a breakdown of the gender, the ethnicity of those that have been entering those applications. And for reference as well, for these numbers, we consider those that are eligible, who are employees that work full-time for us. We consider full-time everything with an FTE of 0.75 or above. Current female demographic for the school district in that full-time population, it is actually 75 to 24. So the applications received match very well our population. Ethnicity-wise, non-Hispanic or Latinos are 70% the population that is a full FTE full-time, and Hispanic is 30%. So there is a little bit of a disparity there on the applications received, and certified staff compromises 56% of the total of that population. Classified staff, it's 40%. Admin is 3.76%. And there is a breakdown of those applications received. Applications approved to date, 40 of all of those received. Truly the most common denial reason is the lack of full information or vague information. Those that do not provide what are they going to be using the funds for, those applications have been denied, and we get everything, mostly the committee has been approving. To date, 18 requests had been paid. That is 45% of the approved applications. And we have reimbursed a total of $59,514, which represents 45% of the total originally requested. And that's it on this portion.
Thank you. Director Tytler, we'll start with you. Each board member will have 2 minutes and we'll do 5 minutes of open discussion.
First of all, I want to say thank you to the request from our last meeting to get translation into this room. I very much appreciate that. So thank you for getting that done. I also I'm very happy that we're having this education opportunity fund. I think that's great for teachers who can then go out and get greater learning and more learning and doesn't have to come out of their pocket. I think that's a very positive move that we've done as a district. So thank you for that. My other comment regards our strategic plan and the implementation. And I appreciate that hearing and the movement towards the plan centering on the needs of Latinx students and emerging bilinguals. And I especially want to talk about the goal number one of rigorous education for all. I think that's something that really we need to continue to have conversation on. What is rigorous education for all? If we have students who are in a classroom where as emerging bilinguals, where their language level is at a limited English language level, what is it that we're considering rigorous education? And so by just upping the bar on saying we're expecting more, sometimes isn't sufficient or enough in that situation. And we need to look at ways in which we are giving that the way we are programming, the way that we are disseminating information so that that is comprehensible to the students in a way through either academically or linguistically, but one of those needing to be met at all times for those students. And so as we're talking about rigorous education, I look forward to the conversations continuing where that is the theme of our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Director After?
Thanks. Yeah, just a couple of questions. In regards to the update on the communications process, who is our PIO going forward? If someone we don't have one. So if the media wants to reach out to someone, they previously would have reached out to the PIO. Who do they reach out to?
Yeah, when we decided not to staff that position, we redirected all media requests to our communications specialist. So right now they all go to Christina Vargas.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my only question or comment. Thanks.
Director Ramirez?
Thanks. Oh, when is the team gonna take another opportunity to discuss if you guys do need a PIO or not?
Great question. I really think this year we're trying to figure out where our current capacity is. I think we've looked a lot at areas where current staff want to grow in roles and looking at how we can support them to do that and then fill gaps in other places. We're always really interested in supporting our internal staff who want to grow into different positions to have pathways for that. I mean, we're very conscious of the budget challenges. And so I think my short answer would be, I don't know, but the goal is to have an answer by the end of this year in terms of communications. I think what this current work with contractors is allowing us to do is start to get a little more comfortable of what does it look like for us to have more capacity in terms of communications through contractors. This isn't a work. I mean, I know that the board historically has done that, but we haven't as a senior leadership team really leverage support in that way. And so I think we also see this work this year with contractors as kind of a trial and error while we're also doing that work, assessing our own team's internal capacity.
So what I'm hearing from you is June. Okay.
Yeah.
So because I think that is something that this board has had in common, that we have actually all felt that we need a PIO. So I just want to make sure that the board has felt that it's necessary, that it's something that we need. We've expressed that to you, and what I'm hearing from you is June, we're going to reassess.
Yeah, I mean, we're reassessing all the time. I think we're trying to figure out how, I think, my take would be that we need the work that often PIOs do covered.
Yeah.
Whether that looks like an actual human wearing that role, I don't know yet. But I absolutely agree. And I think that's where we are right now, of that kind of strategic communication support, that ability to have both routine and responsive communications coming out consistently on tone, on brand, making sure that we are providing information that's accessible to all of our populations in formats that matter to them, that are accessible. That work, I think, is where we're currently sitting with, how much of that do we currently have staffing for? Do we then what's left? And is that a complete role? Is that a part-time something? Is that something that we can contract out? What does that feel like for us? How does that kind of a relationship work for us? Are there cost savings there? So I think we're grappling with all of that.
Yeah, and I think for me as a board member, what matters is the consistency, right? When you have something that you can have consistent, that community, stakeholders, media can all have consistency. I think that's an important piece. So, again, I think the PIO is something that the board has all felt that was really important that we had. I don't see that we're not gonna need some sort of communication going out ever. So I feel, I just want to make sure that, again, I reiterate that. When it comes to the strategic communications and the plan materials, you mentioned feedback opportunities for families. Can you explain a little bit more what that's going to look like?
Yeah, what I think that's going to look like is like opportunities to look at mock-ups, opportunities to look at drafts. There's so much from an operational lens, there is so much if on the strategic plan. I think where we've really gotten stuck is what really matters to our stakeholders, to kids and families in the community, to pull out of that. And so, we can guess, and we're actually getting help. This is why we're having contractors help us at what's right. But we need to do some drafts of materials and get them in front of people and say, is this right? Are these the components of what you were looking for? In us being able to better tell that story. So that's what I think we're looking at through January and February is the opportunity to look at mock-ups, and talk about with families and community, what does this need to look like? What does it say? Is it a brochure? Is it a video? Is it a website? What's most meaningful to you?
And what's the expectation on the responses you're going to receive before you make a decision for the March launch?
I don't know. We haven't totally designed that process yet, so I'm not sure.
Okay. And then just one more thing on the strategic communication. So our contract right now is through February.
Mhm.
And then we're gonna create a new contract.
And then we're gonna kind of step back and say, what did that work? Was that, what was that lift like for our internal teams? What was the value add for us as a district? And reassess, what that needs to look like moving forward.
And I'm gonna assume that decision will be made before the March launch.
Two separate things. So the strategic communications are really the support around pretty much focused on kind of our financial challenges and helping us better
Okay,
communicate
got
and
it.
articulate that. Then that March timeline is more for the strategic plan materials.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Director DeFreitas?
Yeah, again, thanks to both of y'all for presenting, and I have questions. Well, first of all, I think it's great that we brought on contractors to help, especially with the challenges. I read your memo as good phrasing around the intensity was growing in this conversation, and so we narrowed the focus. I think that's critical. Again, maintaining transparency is a full-time job when it's this intense, and I think a lot of times community members and other staff even hears PIO or communications staffing and they think it's sort of extra if we can afford it. But what that means is that those hours bleed onto your calendar and onto Begonia's and onto everybody else's to write, draft, revise. And then just as Director Ramirez was identifying, it's not necessarily consistent chief to chief, school to school with what we're saying. So I really applaud that move, and I hope that we can continue. Again, I'm just voicing support for Director Ramirez's statement here. For identifying that having a full-time position there will help us stand in the proactive realm of strategic comms more than the reactive. And there was no way we could have known how much reacting we were going to have to do. So I also appreciate O Communications coming on for the messaging around strategic communications. I do want to just emphasize that you mentioned it, and I really support this, the training and opportunity to grow in-house, especially communications, because when you have a skilled professional who understands the nuance of a community, who's done comms for a while, growing that skill set, adding the hard skills of strategic comms, well, not all hard, but like offering clear training and a path forward there is really valuable. So I would strongly encourage looking into that, maybe using the Employee Opportunity Fund. I don't know if that's available, but I just wanted to voice those statements. So thanks.
Thank you. Thanks. I wasn't going to talk about my support for hiring a full-time PIO, but I wholeheartedly support the district in making that decision and making a hire for a full-time position. I think the one thing that has been consistent since I've been on the board is there is consistently something that we need communications management about. And so many tensions arise when there is not fully formed communication, not consistent communication. And as Director DeFreitas said, it is a full-time job staying on top of it. and I think it was just in 2021 when we rolled the two positions together to make them one. And previously we had a full-time PIO. So I would 100% support the district going back in that direction. And I think that it is a priority. Is that the one consistent is that there's always something going on that needs to be addressed via communications. My other questions are around the employee opportunity fund. If I'm remembering correctly, the dollars for this came from the 2021 mill levy. And what's the total amount that we have allocated annually for it?
Originally, it was allocated $280,000.
Okay.
And what we found, so we lived through a year
Mhm.
and we've of course been scrubbing budgets because of other concerns. And it was really illuminating to us to see what was requested in year one, how much was awarded in year one. And so we anticipate having a conservative assessment moving forward of what we would allocate to this based on this year's allocations. And so, and we want to continue to utilize this and leverage this support, especially in alignment with what's coming for recruitment and retention planning. And we also want to make sure that we're using the money we allocate.
Yeah, and the money, I'm trying to remember the language from the mill levy, but it can be anything related to recruitment and retention, right? Okay, so it doesn't have to be, or not,
It's not a hard and fast number or like percentage.
but it's the purpose.
You got it.
Got it. Okay. And then how many more rounds are we gonna go through for this year, or are we done for this year?
This calendar year, we're done. I'm starting another round January 1st. And we'll go at least throughout the January and the March applications.
Okay.
Yeah.
So through this school year again?
Yeah.
And have you found that, I saw August numbers dipped, but I'm assuming that's just from summer and taking coursework might not be on everybody's mind at that time. But does it seem like there's more interest drumming up around it, or do you feel like it's pretty stagnant?
From time to time, I do still receive a request, hey, is there anything that could help me? I'm interested in this studies. And I keep forwarding the information often, referring them to, and stay tuned, the application window is coming up.
Okay. All right, that's all I had. So we'll have 5 minutes of open board discussion.
The only thing I would like to mention is, once again, with the idea of our commitment to addressing the achievement gap coming up in our next board meeting, we will be talking about policy on language development. And I just want to say thank you to the group of parents and community members that have continued to be coming to our meetings, meeting after meeting, and showing up. And we hear you and see you, and thank you for being here.
Anything else?
I just want to make sure to mention that, I think with obviously the strategic communications ending in February and the strategic plan and the work being done in January and February, I think it'll be really important for us to get as much communication out as possible on that. I personally would like to have the team come up with a number that you guys want to hit for that, we hit this number of families and therefore we feel that we can do our March launch. I think that's important for you guys to set a goal, but I think it's going to be important just to see how communication plays out in that process. So just wanted to mention that.
Anything else? Thank you both. At this time, we welcome members of the public who have signed up to address the board. There are 3 speakers signed up tonight. The board allots 45 minutes for public comment. To respect of all who are present, speakers are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. Reminder to all public speakers to uphold our procedures for public comment. We ask you to be thoughtful and constructive with your comments, and thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. Members of the public who wish to share their views with the board may also always do so in writing at any time. For this evening's public comment, we received 4 written comments. Our first speaker tonight is Jeannie Lakin.
educated in this district and speak solely for myself. How much money does the district have or can count as having that is currently unallocated? How much of that is mandated by federal and/or state law to be held in reserve? How much beyond that is current board policy to maintain? Because if there's no room to draw on funds the district has when responding to the millions of dollars worth of budgetary shortfalls, and a key barrier is updating a policy for times such as these, then if there isn't, then no ground has been lost. But I could not say it would be gained. Whether this is a job you wanted to take on after recently being elected for the first time to the board, or you are continuing your service, you are starting with very little trust. In case you truly don't know why that is, here is a start. It is known that a certain someone previously hired for our district and their spouse collectively paid taxes on and therefore most likely owned 3 residential properties before moving here. One property was sold for nearly $1 million, while the other 2 were maintained and continued to have their taxes paid while that staff member worked here. To not know that on your part at best seems like negligence or incompetence. It isn't the staff member's fault for owning them or the fault of property tax records being public. How you responded is, can you do better? I honestly don't know. Please prove me wrong in the best way possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Katia Gonzalez.
Good evening. Okay. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Katia Gonzalez, and I am the parent organizer for the Roaring Fork School District for Voces Unidas de las Montañas. I am proud of the Roaring Fork School District as I attended Glenwood Springs Elementary School, Glenwood Springs Middle School, and Glenwood Springs High School. The Colorado River and the mountains of our home have molded me into the person I am today. The Roaring Fork School District has consistently fallen short in supporting our Latino and Latino students. How can it be acceptable that as a community and as a district, we have allowed these students to face academic challenges for more than a decade? Schools are meant to uplift and empower all children, yet our students are struggling academically. When will the district publicly address these ongoing issues? How many more students need to be affected before action is taken? The gap in achievement between Latino and Latina students and white students is very present and has been present for decades. These disparities fall far short of providing a quality education for all. We demand that the district develops 3 plans through representative input from Latino parents, a plan to eliminate the academic gap present in our schools, a plan to transform and increase parental engagement, and a plan for the district to recruit, hire, and retain teachers and administration that accurately reflect the student population. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rosalba Tellez.
Muy buenas noches, estimados miembros de la mesa directiva. Sí, I'm sorry. Muy buenas noches, estimados miembros de la mesa directiva. Mi nombre es Rosalba Telles y soy madre de un exalumno del Distrito Escolar del Roaring Fork. Estoy aquí para comentarles sobre las políticas educativas inadecuadas que experimentamos mi hijo y yo durante el tiempo que él estuvo en el distrito escolar, particularmente con respecto al programa de educación individualizado que mi hijo recibió. El manejo de su IP de mi hijo a menudo lo expuso al escrutinio público que resultó en intimidación y bullying en la escuela. Esto condujo a su expulsión en lugar de que él recibiera el apoyo adecuado. Además, mi hijo recibió un diagnóstico de su autismo nivel 1 después que estuviera fuera de la escuela. Quizás si mi hijo hubiera recibido su diagnóstico antes, hubiera tenido acceso a los recursos necesarios durante años muy cruciales en su desarrollo. Le pido a la mesa directiva que considere reformas en 5 áreas en las que hemos platicado con mi hijo. La política de cero tolerancia, limitar las expulsiones a casos graves e implementar prácticas restaurativas. Identificación cultural, crear programas para que los estudiantes hispanos celebren su herencia y sean más inclusivos. Salarios de los profesores, aumentar los salarios para atraer y retener a educadores calificados. Prevención de acoso escolar, establecer protocolos eficientes de seguimiento y apoyo a los alumnos. Y por supuesto, implementación personalizada del IP para abordar las necesidades individuales y garantizar el diagnóstico oportuno. Espero que la experiencia de mi hijo y la mía que hemos tenido en el Distrito Escolar de Roaring Fork pueda ayudar a inspirar cambios positivos para futuros estudiantes. Quiero resaltar la importancia, por último, de una comunicación clara y consistente con los padres del Distrito Escolar de Roaring Fork. Ahora les entregaré a Katia un folder que mi hijo escribió de propia mano y espero que se tomen el tiempo para leerla. Gracias.
Gracias. The next business in order is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes routine personnel, minutes from our board meetings on 11/13 and 11/20, and policies KDB, GBEE, EBA, JFABD, JICDD, JICDE, JLCE, JIC, and repeals of policies EA and GBG. Directors, are there any items that you would like to pull off the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Finding my place again. The consent agenda. Director Ramirez, do you want to pull something? Sorry, I'm just looking to make sure that we went through all of these in policy committee for a second time. I think I'm fine. Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Can you please call the vote?
Aye.
Director DeFreitas.
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg.
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Aye.
Director Titler.
Aye.
Directors, you've just approved the consent agenda. The next business in order is discussion on policies JFABE and JICB, JKBA, regulation JFABE-R, and exhibit JLCD-E. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. We'll begin with Director After. What's going on?
Thank you. I just have a question on JICB, which is graduation regalia, which we talked about in our pre-Thanksgiving policy heavy meeting. I think it's a really important policy, and we're not voting on it tonight, right? This is second of third reads. Okay, great. So I think it's a really important policy, and for this board to pass, and I do support its intention. I did really like the original language prior to us adding the phrase political affiliation into the text. And I'm grateful to you, Dr. Cole and Jonathan, for reaching out to Brent to get some insight into that. As I noted in the document over the weekend, I would still like us to consider striking that phrase from the policy. And I think the easiest solution here would be for us to stick to the language of the statute. Page 2 of that is where the clear language is located. And again, I think it's a really important policy. I would like to support it to protect students' rights. And I think for us to keep that intention, we should remove that phrase around political affiliation.
Thank you. Director Ramirez.
I don't know that I have any edits. I feel like we had some questions that we went over. I was like, where's Anna? I was looking over there. Sorry. I feel like we had some things we went over in policy committee, and I don't know if Catherine, you remember what we wanted to make sure we brought up during for discussion. I feel like
Graduation regalia.
was it
That was
just-
the biggest one that for me was we need to circle back. As
I
in-
thought there was another one we pulled. Okay.
We pulled the exhibit.
Mhm.
-E-2 by law.
Mhm. Okay, then I guess I don't have any questions.
Dr. DeFreitas.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at this. I kind of lead towards Director After's concerns. The last paragraph definition, cultural means a recognized practice or tradition of a certain group, et cetera. And includes only a protected class based on, and then they list the protected classes. I think that covers it. And I still don't feel like the second sentence, which says what it does not mean, is necessary or helpful.
Director Tyler.
I guess I'll take the other side of the coin. I do feel it is important to include political affiliation. I think if we don't state that, then we can have our gowns covered in speech politics, and I don't think politics has a place in our graduation ceremonies, and so I think it is important to explicitly state that fact in that part. So I would very much strongly hope to keep that in. And then the other question I had was on a separate policy, was on JKBA. And on the JKBA. Oh, that was in consent agenda? I
No.
didn't think so.
I don't think so.
No.
Oh, no, JKBA is,
It's in there.
yeah.
The second to last paragraph, where the superintendent is directed to establish procedures to implement this policy so that removals from a classroom occur in a consistent manner throughout the district. I want to know, if we do move that way, what is that going to look like? How is that going to be done? And it seems like there's a lot more work going towards that if we're going to try to consistently decide how those procedures go versus having that being done at a school level, what that removal looks like. And it seems like that would cause a lot of need to have schools get together and come up with that common language. And I particularly would think that that can be a school decision within the whole idea of having removals, but how that school can have that individual choice on how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. And if you've lived it or been in a school where they have different practices or cues, different schools use different strategies in terms of disciplinary removal from classroom and the when, and it is something that we are trying to norm on consistently. But there is you're right, that there's this tension between us making sure that the policy is being implemented consistently, although the way it might show up in a school might have different language for kids. In terms of what works and the strategies that they're using, whether they're using like a zones of regulation language where they're talking about colors or they're talking about different behaviors, so I think there's ways that things are implemented slightly differently, but yeah, the goal of that and that what we have here in that language that was added is that, yes, this directs the superintendent to make sure that we have consistency on implementation, but our typical approach has been to have some autonomy with schools.
So with the way it's written, do you feel like this allows for that autonomy?
I mean, I think that the ways that schools name these things or who they maybe would contact or what the process might be could have some variation from school to school, but that the general components of what we would consider disciplinary removal from the classroom that is not moving into suspension. Those are pretty clear that this is a very short-term removal, kind of a cool down, and anything longer really moves us into a different set of policies. Those are the kinds of lines that I would expect to be implemented extremely consistently.
Okay, I guess I read that a little bit different. In that it seems like it's how it should happen in that school, but. Because I see it as removal from the classroom versus the acts that cause the removal.
I maybe say more. Because I would say that we utilize and work for consistent. So you're asking more about like what has happened before a student is removed to class.
And that I
Whether we have the
understand that we
same-
should have that consistent thing, but like the way I'm reading this is it tells me so that removals from a classroom occur. And is it, so it's not the removal part from the classroom that this is stating, but it's the act that is causing the removal.
Behavior that leads to the removal.
The
what you're
behavior
saying,
that leads
yeah.
to the removal versus like using a card system where you might have yellow, red and green cards. And that's how you're using for your removal from the system versus another school who might use a different system to remove the students.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I would say that what we would be looking for is that by the time we're utilizing a strategy like removal, that the behaviors that we're seeing are, if we're both teachers in different schools with seventh graders, if we're both making a choice to ask for support to remove a student from class for 10 to 15 minutes, that whatever that has led to that determination would be aligned to that discipline matrix that says that this is an appropriate strategy. So that it's not okay for me, who is extremely perhaps irritated by kids chewing gum, wouldn't kick a kid out of class for that. Whereas a student who's really having a trouble regulating and settling down and maybe needs to take a walk or get outside for a minute, that we're not having the same, that we're applying that strategy consistently for behaviors across schools. I mean, that would be, my sense is like, that's what this is trying to get to, is that we're, and where we mention that school leaders should consult the discipline matrix, which really helps have that predictable, progressive and uniform guide. That's what we're looking for, that whether a school's using a card system to
Right,
determine
so
that.
would it just be the end of that line being something like procedures to implement this policy so that unwanted behavior is
I think there's like, I could propose some language that shifts it. It's not that the removals are consistent. It's that the policy is implemented consistently so that removals occur consistently. Like it's not, I understand what he's saying.
Okay.
I think we could clean the language up because I think he's right.
Okay.
I think it's just like, I think it just would take some language, like wordsmithing and tweaking if we can flag it, and I can try to go in and.
Sure.
Okay. Cause I hear what you're saying. Makes sense. Everybody want me?
Well, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, we'll go in the 5. I have a couple of comments. I still have concerns about confidentiality with us sharing student information in JFABE and JFABD. In JFABD, it's that we may coordinate with other districts, local service agencies, agencies in alignment with JRCB, which I think helps and cleans it up because that's our confidentiality policy. And JFAB, it says the district will coordinate with other districts, local child welfare agencies, other child and family centered agencies or programs providing services to students. And I guess, I don't know, I still have concerns about how broadly that's written. So I just wanted to flag it. I just think it's still very broad, like any child and family centered agency. I don't know. I might, yeah, again, be just flagging it just because I'm,
I mean,
Neurotic about
I
that,
will
but-
name that like our process is we don't talk about kids or families with partners without a release of information from the parents that
Right.
you can go talk to Youth Zone about the work that we're doing with them.
and that's why I feel like I would be more comfortable if that was explicitly stated, because
Yeah,
even though it says in
Okay.
accordance with this policy, I think that we need to make clear that we're not going to be sharing student information without a release. And like, I appreciate naming the policy, but I still think that
To name
it
that.
could be misconstrued very easily by an administrator pulling this and being like, oh, we can share it with all these places, right?
Mhm.
Without them digging and taking the next step to go to the next policy. So
Yep.
I think it would behoove us to add a little bit more in there.
And can you, and just because I'm trying to track, we're
Yeah.
talking about having that more explicitly tight language in the students in foster care and homeless students and having it
both.
consistent and.
Yeah. And I would also want us to confirm, because one says may and the other says will. Are we required to share in both instances? The students experiencing homelessness says may, students in foster says will.
Mm.
So I would just clarify and make sure that we're aligned on those two.
Okay.
And then as for the graduation regalia, I also disagree. And I think that one, I think it's important for us to include what cultural does not include, because that is in the statute, that language is statutory other than the 3 clauses that we added in. I also think that the point of this statute was to ensure that students were able to celebrate their cultural heritage. It was not meant to give students or anyone else the ability to I don't know what the right word is here that I want to use, but I mean, it's those things that it specifically says cultural is not, right? Like, and I think it's important that we maintain that line, especially in a time where politically people are tying their national origin to their politics. They are tying their religion to their politics. They are tying their gender identity or expression to their politics. And I think making it clear that although cultural can mean those things, it doesn't in this instance would be smart of us to head off any situations where that becomes an issue. We've got 5 minutes of open discussion, and I think Director Ramirez remembered what she wanted to bring up.
Thank you. So on JKBA and policy committee, we had a conversation about the team talking to leadership and clarifying their understanding on this policy specifically and what removal was and was not. I just want to check in. I think it's important to follow up on if that conversation happened.
I will have to check with Dr. Park on that. I know this was on their radar and I'm pretty sure that this was addressed, but I don't have let me follow up
Okay.
in our next communication with the board. And if not, we'll remember to pull this from that, not pop it in the third read.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would appreciate that because I do think part of the reason why we had that discussion again is in regards to that last sentence about parents being notified. And so, you know, I think that we need to have clarity on if a student is removed for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, up until what time, then are we going into the discipline matrix for suspension, in-school suspension, and then therefore, due to a process, our parents would be notified, right? That's what we do now. So I just think we need to have clarity on this policy just to make sure that Stacy goes back to the team, make sure that there is a general understanding from leadership on what this policy is actually going to do.
Okay, I just want to make sure I get this right. So we are going to pull, if either the board will be updated from me directly on whether we had this in front of leaders, that they saw it. And if I don't get to that update and before the January 1st meeting, 15th, we'll pull it from the consent so we can give that update during this moment. Does that sound okay? Okay.
That sounds fine.
I think in terms of defining removal, it would be smart for us to check in and see if there's a legal definition for removal. I don't think we should
Good idea.
just have our leaders define it. I think we should understand, because I'm sure this has been litigated.
Well, no, and I think the point was that I think even the team, I don't know if you guys remember, we had this discussion during our meeting, even the team was confused on
Yeah.
removal. So I think I want to know, remember if there was clarity established.
I think there's, in the policy, it says if it's more than one class period, it constitutes in-school suspension. Is that not sufficient for that definition?
Yeah, that entire section, that disciplinary, the second paragraph, disciplinary removals include the following, it was all subsequent, that all followed that discussion where we wanted the definition in here and wanted that clear. So that is all new because of those comments where we defined it in those 3 bullets. So if that still feels insufficient, we can do more.
I feel like that for me clarifies the timeline and scope if it's more than one class period. That I'm not sure that, I mean, at the level of direct policy governance, I feel like establishing procedures is what we're asking you to do, and that's what that's clearly saying. And then the length of time for removal as it's written here is in my mind sufficient. And it even says consider a short break, no longer than 10-15 minutes, et cetera, et cetera.
Right now, I think we all agreed on that. I think what I'm asking is, so are we saying that every parent, if your kid is taken out for 15 minutes, in accordance with established procedures, that's what we didn't, there wasn't clarity on that. Are parents and guardians being notified of the student's removal from class? Because that's what it says in this policy right now.
The last line,
In the,
the very last line says that.
got it.
And often those removals are just to go down to the office
Mhm.
and
Cool
take
down.
a break, calm down.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll have to double check on where we are
that's fine.
currently. It looks to me like that is new language from the board.
Okay.
So it sounds to me like that hasn't been in the policy before. So the expectation that would be happening right now has not been made by the boards. Does that make sense? So whether or not parents are being notified, I'm not sure. It hasn't been part of policy yet. It could be happening, but I'm not sure.
Well, I don't think we added this. I think this was in here and I just highlighted it because that was my question at our last meeting. So I think it'd be great if, is that, Jonathan, am I wrong on that?
I can't see.
I guess I wonder, is that this level of granularity that we should have in this policy? I
Well, and
feel as
that's, I
though
think, why we
established
asked.
procedures
Yeah.
is covering it, and then operationally it's up to the superintendent. I don't know that.
Well, I think that's why we don't understand if the board put it in or staff
Okay,
put it
so we
in.
want to take it out.
So I think we need to know where it came
Where
from.
it came from.
Okay, and then JICDE, we had a conversation about this and I remembered after that we talked about data metrics for bullying and the plan. I cannot remember, and Anna, Catherine, I don't know if we asked for something to be, I'm trying to, the survey, what are other ways to measure current state? Number 5,
Wait,
Where are you?
JICD was on consent.
what,
JICDE.
Yeah,
That's
really?
No.
I thought that's the one that we just pulled.
it's on our staff memo.
it's on the staff memo, but it's on consent.
So I need the time.
That's,
We just approved it.
Okay,
Can I have one more thing about the regalia
Mhm.
policy? Just, we had Brent weigh in, I'm reading in the comments here, our council. And I think I just wanted to say again, I do think that the political affiliation is excluded by the definition of protected class. And I don't feel like it serves us to add further definition of what that isn't, and what he offers is the same perspective. My only concern about the draft is that the endeavor to define what is not permitted or cultural may be difficult and could give someone room to argue that what they have in mind is permitted because it's not on that list. I really do think we need to stick with the positive statement of it is protected class only. That does exclude by definition, if you look at the federal level.
that language is statutory. I mean, I disagree with them on this because that language is directly from the statute. So they make that argument regardless.
We
It's not
added
fit.
the word political affiliation.
We added the 3 additional, what it's not. But
Right.
the argument that adding the list of what it's not opens the door for them to make arguments. I don't think it's valid because we didn't create the list of what it's not. We added a few additional. But just by saying that there is a list, it opens the door to making those arguments. I just don't think that that's.
But we did add, but just to clarify, we added hate speech, political affiliation, and extreme disruption. That is not what's in the statute right now.
No, I agree, but Bren's position is that we shouldn't have a not list at all. We shouldn't include a not list. Because that opens the door to people arguing that what they're wearing isn't included on the not list and give them an
Right.
opportunity to make that argument, but.
Brent's, what he's suggesting is an elegant, potentially elegant solution to the moment we find ourselves in this conversation. I don't know about its legal. If you click on the title of the document, the graduation regalia highlighted, he gives a pretty long description.
I mean, I'll name from a staff point, we have in practice, as you all have seen at graduation, been aligned to the intent of this. And we have not I think we're future writing here. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm conscious of the what does staff think here? And it's, I would say it's one of those things that we have been doing this in practice with all the intent of the state statute and the policy. So I worry about where this goes. But I don't necessarily have any clarity on
Say
that.
more about your worry where this is.
I do worry, given the current context, how this will be utilized to support graduation regalia that's not aligned with the goals. And so I guess mostly my takeaway is I'm not clear on what we need as school leaders to continue to do what we've been doing, which has been managed, I think, fairly well. But I do agree with the board that this is a different political climate.
Okay, really quick, just for the team. So on JIC B, the blue section during work students may not, are we taking that part out?
My recollection from the meeting was that was added as something for the staff I thought the staff was going to go back and look at the edits, talk to Brent, which has now happened. And that was for consideration. I think that was the suggestion. If that's how other folks remember that conversation.
Okay, so we were saying we were gonna take the highlighted portion on the bottom out and then leave the blue part.
That was never agreed on. I would like to do that. Or I would like to take out the additions that this team added. But Kenny disagrees.
I also disagree.
And
I defer to the advice of counsel here.
But if we're talking about the advice of counsel, then we're getting rid of that whole clause. If that were the case.
Any of the may not clauses, yeah, in my mind.
So which is not what the statute says. I think if the point of the policy is to provide clear direction to our schools who are going to have to be enforcing this, that we should be clear.
And I do believe if we're opening up the whole, we're opening up the can of worms by saying we can do something that's outside just for cultural reasons, I think we're going to be opening ourselves up to other things if we're not defining limits.
I think that's the reason that the legislature defined the word cultural, because that can mean so many different things to so many different people. And so the reason that the legislature determined that they needed to not just define it, but define what it is not, is because it can be so vague and because this is a new statute and there is no case law written on it. And so I think that the more precise we can be in our language and our intent as a district within statutory limits, I think that puts us in a better position.
I mean, if you want to be okay. I mean, the statute also says, I've got it pulled up right now.
The
That-
Native American.
No, I'm not talking, I mean, it does talk about tribal stuff, which we also struck. But it says, the section does not limit a school board or district's ability to prohibit an adornment that's likely to cause substantial disruption or interfere with graduation ceremony, ... But, that section must be based on evidence of disruption rather than relying on an undifferentiated fear or apprehension of disturbance. And I think if we add political affiliation because we're afraid of the disturbance, then that goes against the statute. I just want to say, I like this policy because it's creating an opening for people to express themselves. And so what I find problematic about the addition of political affiliation is that it's also closing that.
Can I just ask, so during our last meeting, when we reviewed this, we made a recommendation to the team to reach out to one of its creators, which is Voces. Were you guys able to do that? And
We were, and they weren't able to provide us any feedback by tonight.
okay,
Can
It'll be the
we,
third read?
can we also reach back out to CASB and ask for if they've got a sample policy yet, or at least ask them to review our sample policy? And have their legal give us input?
and I think I would like to reach out to Representative Velasco too, just because she was one of the sponsors on this bill. Just to see if there is an opportunity for clarification with her team. I think that all of us have very valid questions and concerns and opinions on this, and I think the more that we can do as a team to be diligent, the better, especially if we're going to be the first school district to actually pass this policy. We want to be sure that this is clear and aligned with the statute. I did have one, sorry, I don't mean to take us off to a different policy, but I just.
Can I ask another question about this policy before we
Okay,
leave
go
it
ahead.
then? Can somebody clarify for me what the procedure is for us then as a board? So if we decide we want to keep it, don't want to keep it, then does it become a vote?
Yes.
It'll be
Okay.
come a vote next.
Thank you.
JFABE, I did a deep dive in our policies, and I know we briefly talked about it, and I see this question that Stacy put in here regarding the Family Resource Center, that we updated the language. The policy that has Family Resource Center right now is the equity, the DI, ADB policy. And then I think there was one other policy, and it's not top of mind right now what it was, but I would feel much more comfortable leaving it at Family Services. And I'm fine leaving it / Family Resource Center team. I just feel like Family Resource Center team doesn't do all of the family services that we might be including in that.
Okay, can you take me to where you are again?
JFABER.
-R, yeah.
The second paragraph. I feel like I would be much more comfortable if it said Family Services, Family Resource Center team.
That's how it is in JFAB. It has a different ABE,
Yeah, well, it says Family Centered Agencies.
so at least has that extra
Yeah,
agencies.
So you
but
recommend,
there, I mean, it's different meanings, I guess. Does that make sense? Yeah. Thank you, Anna.
I think so. I mean, are we naming? Now that I'm looking at this. We're naming that we want this person to be working with family services. Do we mean? Are we talking about in the district? Is that a group in the district, outside the district?
This
Well-
is a required position that we have to have the child welfare education liaison.
Will be responsible for working with and then it lists all these people, right? So when we say family services, are we talking about?
I would say
external
family
services?
services providers, or I would actually start it with Family Resource Center team, family services providers. Try, because that just leaves the door open. If there are any other providers, then that would be the point person.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, I'm doing this not in edits.
Family service.
Like this, providers?
Yeah,
Sure.
because I think that encompasses what you're saying. If
Yep.
there are any other offices or teams that are working to provide family services, then that is a catch-all.
Did that get right?
Yep.
Yes. thank you.
Okay, is that good? Are we good about that?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Are we good on policy? Okay. I'm gonna move us forward. Thank you. Okay. The next business in order is the CFO update from Chief Chicoine. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. And the board did have a work session on this topic ahead of time.
Thank you, guys. I'll just go through it briefly and then we'll take questions afterwards, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. He told me twice and I was like all focused on this. Okay. Whoop. There, it's okay. Thank you. Okay, the first thing I want to note is that this information continues to come more and more into focus every minute, actually. And what the whole focus of for me and Anna this year is really to make sure that we are providing the information to the public, to the board, to all the stakeholders as soon as we know it, and to be as transparent as we possibly can, good, bad, or indifferent, great news, not so good news. And that's the expectation of what we're looking to do for this year. And that's kind of the tone we're setting. So with that, the one thing that I'm going to do with this presentation is I'm going to look at just the very high level summary for 2023 24 audit on what the results are looking like for that. But we're going to have the auditors coming next month to really dive into that one. What impacts we have for 24, 25, and then looking into 2025, 26, and then an update also on the phase 2 of the health insurance, self-insurance issue, how we're going to pay for that $5.7 million shortfall, which was the one-time situation that came up because of moving to self-insurance that we've been working on. So, okay, so for the pre-audit estimate, it really looks like the available fund balance, that's the unrestricted fund balance, is going to be pretty close to what we estimated. And that's not including any self-insurance losses or anything that we're trying to do to mitigate that issue. So that's just separating those two things aside. This is what it looks like. We're going to have a full audit report, and I really am looking forward to also the board report that the auditors are going to present as well, to give us some ways that we can improve, and then we can have some more discussion on those items. For 2024-25, for the budget and estimated actual property tax, obviously another one of the items for tonight is certification of the mill levy. So did a deep dive on what that looks like. And this slide just really summarizes everything that has changed between years, just for the board and for everybody's information, just a very condensed slide. So for the mill levy override, we've got $830,000 under budget, and there was two reasons for that. So it's $18 million budgeted and 17.17 million that we're actually going to be able to mill for. And there was a reduction in the budgeted inflation number of 5.2% to 1.4% actual. And then we also had an error in the budget where we added the inflation for all mill levies, but we only have one mill levy that floats. That's the 2021 mill levy. So we just made sure that that we caught that and move forward correctly with our certification. There's a positive news as well with the abatement mill. That actually increased from 100,000 budgeted to 524,000 because we're able to mill a remill for the bond, mill levy override, and general fund mills. So that was good news for the budget. And then the other thing we're looking to do is just to get a little bit more conservative for all of our funds as our fund balance is being used for the self-insurance issue, that we're increasing our buffer for the bond fund, which is for the repayment of our loans for our general obligation debt that were approved by voters, from 2% to 3.5% to help us weather a normal downturn. I'd like to get that to 5%, but it seemed like over 2 years was a better time horizon than just trying to do that for 1 year to try to mitigate any impact to the taxpayers, because this is only one time to move that up to where it seems would be a reasonable level. Okay. Phase 2, so there's 3 phases on our health insurance issue with self-insurance. The first one is to really stop the bleeding, meaning that what we were going to do to get away from the self-insurance plan. And we worked with the actuary and determined that it was best for us to move to CBT, which I want to just give a shout out to the payroll department and HR department. I mean, doing an extra open enrollment this year was very challenging. And they're doing that work right now to get through that for our December payroll, which I sincerely appreciate. So, so phase one is in essence done with that work, that hard work the team is doing, and a big thanks to Begonia as well, and her whole team. And now we're on phase two, is how do we pay for this $5.7 to $6 million loss that's estimated? And so we've talked about a couple different things, trying to pull money from where we can find it. We have $1.5 million because of the Meadowood savings, which is great that project was very well managed and came in under budget by that amount. We had $500,000 still available in Secure Schools funding, which is utilized for paying the additional premiums for employees, a part of that 1.1 million, so that they didn't have a mid-year increase in there because they're already contracted for this year. So that would have been really challenging to increase their employee contribution mid-year. Then utilizing that abated tax savings, the 400,000 towards this issue, a 2.5 million general fund balance to get down to minimum fund balance. And then 800,000 is to be determined. And these numbers are still pretty fungible, but this is what it's looking like right now. And that is a consideration, is potentially liquidating a district asset to be able to pay for that at this point. Okay, looking at the big picture for 2025-26, we have estimated revenue changes. It says on the slide 1.2 million in losses for revenues for this year compared to budget. Actually, we got in some more news where we think our at-risk population went down 20%, which impacts our budget another 600,000 as far as lowering our total program funding by 600,000. So that number is closer to 1.8 million at this point. And what this is comprised of is the governor's proposal for total program funding, which is pretty small. The 1.88% or $229 estimated student increase is pretty small, but comparatively to what we've been getting in the past over the last couple of years. But yeah, at least we're getting some additional money. The shortfalls come because we have a student count reduction compared to budget of 77 students. So that is a challenge of 721,000 to our budget this year. And then we're going to also need to look at lowering our student count for the following year also. So it's almost like a double whammy when that happens. So we'll just have to make sure that we understand now we're a declining enrollment district and move forward that way. But it's really tough to move this around when you've over budgeted your student count. So that is a double hit for the next year. It feels like it anyway. And then the mill levy part of that is going to continue to move forward into the next year. So as a budget or as a reduction in revenue, excuse me. Okay, so then the estimated expense increases is 4.6 million, which includes some budget items that were not included in the budget of 1.5 million that we're still trying to solve for. Anna and myself, the senior leadership team, we're all really rallying around that and doing a lot of work around that. And we hope to provide you some more information around that in the January board meeting, either the first or the second one. So there's more to come on that, but we're still working on that one to try to get that down. We are estimating $1.5 million in additional insurance costs for 25-26. That's kind of phase 3 of the health insurance issue, is now we have to pay those costs moving forward. Now, this is a problem that I personally see throughout the whole valley, given just the state of health insurance in the area. But it's hitting us specifically hard this year because we didn't increase our premiums for a couple of years. So we're kind of having to make up for it this year. This would also mean, well, the health insurance committee is just working on this, but this is a low number. This would mean that the employees would be taking a lower plan design, but that still is being in the process of being negotiated with IBB. Okay. So then we've got the 1.3 million for the cost of a step. And then we've got 300,000 for 0.5% increase in para that is anticipated at this point. We'll find out in January whether or not that'll happen. So that's what we know about to this point. Now, when you look at the total current loss before cuts, it was the 1.2 plus the 4.6 million on this page is 5.8 million, but then you need to add that 600,000 I just told you about for the at-risk kids. So then we're at 6.4 million right now. Okay. Okay, and that I pretty much already had talked through that slide, so we'll just go to questions.
Thank you.
Mhm.
As I said, the board spent an hour on this in the work session ahead of the public meeting, but we'll start with Director Ramirez with any additional questions.
First and foremost, thank you.
Mm.
I know this has been an interesting first couple of months with us. We appreciate all of your time and your
Thank you.
dedication.
Thank
Hopefully you never get tired of hearing us say that.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys too. I mean, it's a hard issue to go into for the board too.
I want to first clarify because I think it's important, and we sort of talked about this during our work session. We're talking about 6.2, what did you say? 6.4. 6.4 for our budget moving forward for 25-26, and we're talking about 5.6 with insurance. That is subject to change, obviously, come.
Well, there are two different, I mean, there's like a couple different issues we're trying to solve for.
Right.
There's the $5.7 million, which is the one-time issue.
Right.
Right. And then there's 24-25, which we have some shortfalls and losses we still have to discuss. And there's 25-26, which is now this $6.4 million issue. If that helps.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we clarified.
Yes.
And I think what's important is, so obviously, and the board just got to be at CASB. So obviously a big elephant in the room, if you will, was the financial state for education in the state of Colorado. Obviously across the country as well, but a lot of us are seeing declining enrollment. I think that this is a conversation that a lot of us are having, a lot of us are trying to problem solve for. So I just wanted to make sure that we were as clear as possible on the problems that we at the Roaring Fork School District are solving for.
Thank you.
I want to say that I don't necessarily have any questions, but I do want to just make some basic comments that I think this board, and again, just being at CASB, having the opportunity to talk to our auditor and really dive into where we're at and what we're going to be seeing in our audit come January. I think it's really important, especially in this moment in time, to say that, obviously there is a lot of accountability to go around in this process. I'm so sorry, I'm going to ask for 2 minutes. I think we as a board have felt that this is really important for us to not only educate ourselves on, but also be very diligent and intentional with how we are sharing this information out with community, how our team is being proactive in sharing information with our stakeholders, including our staff, which is really important to us. And so, I think in learning of some of the stress that is happening across the district right now, I think it's important for us to state as a board and for the health of our district moving forward that we're going to problem solve this.
Yes.
This is going to be solved. There are other districts that have been in worse predicaments than we are. And I am confident that our team is going to find solutions to this for not just the benefit of our students, who is our most important stakeholder, but also just for the benefit of everyone that our school district supports, which is really important to us. So, I wanted to start off there. I think this board, all of us have a lot to share, but I think that this is an important moment in time for us as we move forward on this conversation to just be very clear that we are all going to survive this.
Yes. Can I note one thing with that too, is just, I don't know how, I mean, because I'm new to the district. I'm kind of an unknown with some of you. I mean, and I'm getting to know people as I go, and I'm really been fortunate to get to know all of you as we've been moving forward. But I have been through this before myself too. And so, that's just one thing, that this isn't something that is unusual for districts. I mean, it happens occasionally for any school district. This is a challenge that we're going to get through. So I agree with you. Thank you.
Director DeFreitas?
Sure. A lot of what Director Ramirez says is dead on, just identifying that we are dealing with two separate issues, the one directly from health insurance, and then the ongoing budgetary challenges which are being faced broadly across the state and districts for a variety of reasons, and as well as some lessons learned here at home. Can you just touch on briefly, you mentioned the at-risk population declining and how that impacted the 25-26 budget. Could you just explain that a little bit more?
Sure. We actually just received that news today. So we received an email from the state saying, hey, your December estimates for your total program funding is out. So I was anxious about that and just went right into the spreadsheet, and then lo and behold, it was less. The number was less than what I had expected, and had to go, and I actually ended up contacting the state. And so at the bottom line of the story is that when your at-risk population declines, it affects the funding in the formula for your total program funding. So that's in essence what had happened at our district for maybe reasons that we're still looking into right now and diving deep into, because this is obviously something that just came up today. But in essence, when you have that at-risk situation where you have a decline in at-risk kids, which we kind of wonder whether or not that is that maybe the parents are not, because they're getting the lunches and breakfast anyway, maybe they're not filling out the forms, I mean, we just have to really look and dive deep into that process. But until we do that, we have to presume that that loss is going to continue into the next year, because that is part of our what's called recurring funding, meaning that until you get additional funding, it's going to be at that same number over year. So that's why we need to dive deep as a team to try to solve that. And hopefully we can gain back some of that funding for the next year by changing some of our processes, which is the hope we can do that. But I can't promise that right now.
Thank you. Yeah, that's clarifying. I think maybe the free and reduced lunch form needs a rebrand, just so
Yeah.
For all the efforts that went into that this year, though, are recognized. One other thing, there's a financial issues website, and I had a question. Is that public or is that staff only?
That one's staff only.
Okay.
And it's really a log of the internal weekly staff communications and videos of our staff Q&A. It's meant really for a resource guide for staff members.
Okay. Because it's a good resource for staff. It's very nice. And then we also are looking at more out in the community events discussing these issues coming up.
Absolutely. This is to be, at least in terms of, as Chief Chicoine mentioned, the forecast for 25-26. This is really the first time publicly we've been able to wrap our heads around it and name what we see as our best guess at a deficit for 25-26. So, we're working as hard as possible to narrow that gap. And once we feel like we get to a point of what we can manage without needing significant additional input from our community and from staff and from families, we're working to narrow that. And once we get to that gap and have a set of harder, more difficult choices we have to make, yes, then there'll be a lot of community consultation.
And just touching on the difficult choices too, I know the question that's definitely forward in everyone's mind that works for the district is, how are you approaching this in regards to benefits and salaries, and where does that play in as far as these solutions that we're considering? So if you could just share some of what you talked about in the work session.
Yes, I would say our first, and we, when we started this work a couple months ago and knew that there were going to be hard decisions ahead, we compiled, and this was informed by conversations with the board and our IBB leaders, a set of values and priorities around our decision-making and around how we would make decisions. And that document really starts and ends and centers our students. And so our number one goal is to minimize any sort of impact on the students that we serve. And so we are analyzing every decision with the question of how's that impact the day-to-day lives of our students. And then the next priority that we look at is, our number one, I think, organizational resource, which is our people. And so that next kind of scrub and priority is how can we really mitigate, really limit the impacts to staff and their well-being, their salaries, their job security. We have very thoughtful school resource staffing ratios that have been worked on by instructional teams and have been negotiated with our certified IBB through our certified IBB process in the past. Some components of those. And so there's a lot of thought around our staffing. And so we want to be really thoughtful if we are making changes to that, knowing that the people in front of our students, the number has an impact on their experience. And so those are kind of the last kinds of decisions we want to make that are impacting directly students or staff salaries, job security, and benefits. And so we're trying to do everything else possible. And as you've heard from Chief Chicoine, it's really a moving target of where those deficits are, where potential revenues are. But we're going to try to get as far as we can on naming that gap before we come with the kind of that next round of staffing decisions.
Thanks.
Yeah, welcome. Director Tyler.
First of all, again, I'd like to start in saying thank you to yourself, Chief Chicoine, and your team for all the work and extra work that has had to happen over these last months. So thank you. I just want to reiterate the importance of us recognizing that we're talking about two different pots here, about a state forecast that is making life difficult for us and an insurance problem that we ran into that is making life difficult for us. And so that they're not a one combined thing, but we're looking at things from several fronts. I also would like to say that we need to keep in mind how through the insurance fiasco that we've been involved in, that for 2 years that we didn't raise those premiums. And so as we're looking at premiums and what they're coming in for next year and what that big jump looks like, that's a big part of it, of having missed a couple years of raises in premiums. And also recognize that if we had stuck with our same insurance plan as we had always had, we would have had paid about $2 million in extra premiums in those 2 years that we didn't raise premiums. So as we look at a $5.7 million deficit, sure, there is from the insurance part, that is true. But if we had stayed with our own insurance, a portion of that would have also been there from that. And so I think it's just important as we move forward to say, what can we do as a board, as a district to, yes, not impact students, but also look at what we can do financially. And the last part on the recommendation for how to pay our losses is to consider liquidating assets. And I do believe that's something as a board that we need to take on to lessen and to mitigate the losses for teachers and make sure that we're covering at least that side of it away from the state side and making sure that we're doing our part.
Thank you. Director After.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for all the work and hours you've put into this. Really appreciate it and appreciate the previous work session on this. I just want to echo what Kenny said at the end there on his bit. I really feel like on the health insurance shortfall in particular, I know that we as a board want to on that topic, definitely stay as far away from any hits to students or staff at all. And so with that in mind, I know we're still waiting for some information, but I would really like us as a board to have a conversation soon about raising revenue through the sale of underutilized district assets sooner than later. I feel like we need to be prepared for that, even if we don't end up having to pull the trigger on it because we're able to find the money elsewhere. So that's all I had to say about that. Thanks, Christy.
I'll echo all the thanks. Very much appreciative of having you in this role and helping to get through all of these issues. I also want to echo that these are separate issues, the health insurance concern and the ongoing budgetary constraints that we're facing as a district due to declining enrollment and state funding. And I think that's something important that we need to recognize because this isn't, health insurance issue is a one-time, one and done. The future budgetary concerns aren't going away in a year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. Projections are that we will continue to decline for at least the next decade in student enrollment, and we are a per pupil revenue based model, as is every other public school in the state. And I think that that is something that we need to continue to talk about and be very clear with our community about, because it's a tough pill to swallow and understanding how much losing 50 students means to our district and to our bottom line. But it means a lot. And I also agree with my colleagues that in terms of the health insurance, one-time expenses, that we need to figure out a way to cover those where we're not touching staff, not touching students. And I think selling district assets to cover the remainder is a smart way to go. And I appreciate the forward-thinking guidance that you're providing for this board and for this organization. And I think that it's something that is sorely needed. And so thank you very much for that and for pushing us to thinking about what needs to be happening long-term and breaking it down into bites that we can understand. And I got all my other questions answered during the work session, so I appreciated that time. So we'll have 5 minutes of open discussion.
I do want to add some things. So in our conversation with the auditor, I think that it's really important to stress right now for the community, for our stakeholders, especially that the board has already had conversations with our superintendent, with our team and finance committee to really be clear that we as a board obviously also take accountability in what has transpired. And we want to make sure that moving forward, we do create some guardrails to make sure that there is as much of a safety net as possible. And so some of those things are for our finance policy to, one, ensure that it says that we're going to have quarterly statements, which is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to make sure that is something that we, as a board, as this board, care deeply about making sure that we implement. Obviously, as you shared during our work session, and as we've had conversations, is the response to the audit letter. That's a good practice that we hope will continue past this board. And we hope that being set into policy will ensure that process is followed moving forward. And then I think just for us in general as a board, obviously being open to your recommendations and really us being able to lean in to what we as a board need to do to make sure that we are having as much transparency and communication with you, with our superintendent, with our auditor, I think is really important. I feel like this board has taken that to heart, and we have appreciated the opportunity to have time to talk with our auditor beforehand and look forward to hosting him in January so that we can further discuss where we're at in this moment. So I just really wanted to make sure I shared that as a board.
Very good.
I appreciate you bringing that up because I think one of the things that has been hard throughout this process is this is ultimately on the board. We approved the budget, right? And there were holes and there were things missing. And part of the system that we're in is that we are a board of 5 lay people who are volunteers who are expected to approve this very large budget, and we rely very heavily on staff in doing that. And so I think understanding and knowing what guardrails we can put in place, how we can change and update our policies to ensure that the things that we need presented are being presented past when we're sitting here. I think those are the important steps that we need to take right now. Like I don't have the knowledge or expertise to go over this budget with a fine tooth comb. I can't do your job. Like I recognize that, but what can we do as board members to protect this district from this happening again in the future when we're not sitting at this table? Like when any of us are not in this room, how can we impact policy and practice so that this doesn't happen again? And those are really important points that we can't let slip as we go through this process.
Sorry, go ahead.
And in addition to looking towards the future, we still need to look towards the past and see what it is that we need to do to make things right. And as part of that is the recommendations for how to pay for our losses, it leaves it as $800,000 for assets. I think we need to consider more than that and look at that for assets, because that is just the bare minimum, and there was all other money that we were taking that could have been tagged for other services. And so I don't think we should be just looking at what that little minimum amount is that finally little, the minimum amount that covers that last part, but look at a bigger amount so that we can look and say, in what ways can we come close to making a wash what that health insurance mistake did for our.
And yeah, I agree. And I will say for me too, I include the 24-25 shortfalls when I'm thinking about that. Like in my mind, we have three separate issues. We have the health insurance, we have the 24-25 shortfalls and misbudgeted and misallocated funds and all the mistakes from the 24-25 budget. And then we have the forward thinking 25-26 projected budget and how decreasing enrollment and state budgeting is impacting that. And so when I'm thinking about what we as a board should be looking at covering and how we're covering that with sale of assets, with other things, I think one of the critical pieces of information, which we know is coming, is that document that will show us exactly what we're like the punch list from 24-25, which we
23-24, right? For the audit.
No, this year.
Oh, for this year, okay.
24-25. Yeah,
So, yeah.
because having that list of,
Yeah.
we know some line items that we're missing, we know some,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
we know some of the mistakes that were made, but we don't, I don't have a full breadth or like.
Yeah.
Right.
The only nuance
understanding
there
of
is that those mistakes are going to hit the budget on a recurring basis in the future. So we
Right.
can't like sell something for $100,000, cover one mistake and call it good.
Well,
We
and I
have to
think
be
we
able to budget
understand
it.
the recurring ones from this presentation, right? You listed the recurring ones.
The 1.5 million, where the budget misses, those are the ones that you guys are referring to. I haven't given you a full list of those yet. If that's what
So that's not the total amount of recurring.
Oh, well, it's, okay, so let me think about what your question is, because the 1.5 million is a part of what happened this year, because then we also have the recurring revenue shortfalls too.
Mhm.
That's what's tripping me up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so there's really a couple of things that are
Yeah.
recurring into the next year's budget. But for expenditures, that's that big one is the 1.5 million.
Yeah.
I just want to add too that I think it's important to also celebrate and express gratitude for the fact that we have a finance committee this year. I think it has been very helpful to the board.
Yeah.
I think the policy committee has also been very helpful to the board. And those are things that we did not have in place prior to a couple of years ago. Well, literally last
Finance
year.
has been
But-
less than 6 months, right?
But I think that those committees are incredibly important for our success as a school district. I don't know that we put those into policy or the handbook, but I do think that they have helped us, at least as board members, make sure that we were staying on top of the questions that needed to be asked, being informed of what was coming up. And I have found it incredibly important and useful to us and to our team. And I also just want to say, I hope that in this moment, like as a board and as a school district, especially in working with our communications and everything moving forward, like I do hope that as much as possible, we're able to work as a collective, because the success of the district and the executive team and the board is the success of the district. And so I really think it's important for us as much as possible to work as a communal, I don't know, cohesive group of people who just want the good things for each other. And I think it's important, especially in reading public comment, written comment today, that as much as possible, we try not to create chaos in this moment of time. And, you know, there's a lot of mysteries and unknowns still in the future, but I think in this moment, I think it's important for us as a school district and as a board to be very clear that we're gonna be okay. So just want to make sure I reiterate that, close with that. Thank you.
Anything else on this topic before we move to the next finance topic? The next business is action on an approval of the mill levy certification. Do I have a motion to approve the mill levy certification?
I move that we approve the mill levy certification.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll now move into discussion. Chief Chacoine, did you want to do any presentation?
The only thing I was gonna say, just a really high level summary, because we did have that board discussion before. We just went through the high level, also in the prior, report, is just to say that we had a very low increase in assessed valuation. I believe it was like 0.67%. It was very small, this year, much different than it was in the past. And so looking at these mill levy rates, they're fairly close to what they were in the past, slightly more. We have a 1.0 mill increase in the total program mill, and that's per state statute that's required. And so that's the only large increase in our mill levy rates. We had a small increase in our abatement mill, which is a 0.285 total abatement. So that mill levy is slightly higher than the prior year. It was 0.055, it went to 0.285, but the voter approved mill levy or override mill was very much the same, very, very close to the same. And a slight increase in the bond redemption, bond fund, mill levy fund, just for that additional 1.5% that we're setting aside and making sure that we have a cushion in case there is a downturn. So that was the reason for that. And to make sure our cash balances are shored up for that fund. Yeah, and this is a really great part of the slide. Thank you for doing it. And this just shows the difference on what a property tax would cost for a $1.5 million value home. And the difference is $131 for that, or 3% increase. So that just shows the impact there. Which compared to the prior year is much smaller, much different situation. We had the change, very large change in assessed valuation, which really kind of messed with our state loan program. It messed with the cash flow and the taxpayers. It was a lot more of a tumultuous time around our property taxes than just to say it's fairly flat. So, any questions around that?
We'll start with Director DeFreitas this time. Questions?
I don't have any questions about the levy override.
Director Tyler?
I do not have any questions, but just want to make a statement if people are listening, just remembering that when property taxes raise, unless they raise above 100%, the fact that property taxes are more expensive does not change the amount of money that the school get. We get the same amount, and then the state just backfills less. And so as property taxes have gone up, we don't have more money as a district.
Thank you. Director After?
I don't have any questions. Thank you again.
Director Ramirez?
I did want to mention something. So we talked about the abatement mills. How are we as a team going to ensure that moving forward that practice in itself is established as routine for the district?
So right now, the way that we set our mill levy rate is through a spreadsheet. This is how this is all calculated and put together. And so I changed the spreadsheet to reflect that so that those additional abatements would be included in the future.
And I guess is that, is there a accountability tool to make sure that if we have transition, that there is knowledge from either the superintendent or someone within the team that is practice or should be done?
I mean, it's, I'm just going to state overarching is that the CFO role for a school district is very complex and it's very hard when you get a transition. I have the experience already. I've already taken the hits and made the mistakes. So, I kind of know where it's at. But what I do is I do make sure that anytime that I create a process that it is very easy to follow for the next person. And that is that's the best I could do. The only other recommendation I would make is if there was a transition with the CFO position, that you would just make sure that there's some, transition time for that, just like what Nathan had with Shannon. It's just challenging when you don't know the spreadsheets and you're trying to learn it on the fly, and it's hard. I took the extra time and get somebody that really, is OCD. So I'm just gonna call it I'm OCD. But it's like, I don't know why is this different than this, and looking into the law when you're really checking the boxes. It's part of the, like just the personality of like a CFO you'd want to. I guess it's a couple of things. I don't know if that helps, but
I think it leaves some conversation for finance committee.
very
Thank
good.
you.
I don't have any other questions either.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any intervening motions to amend? Seeing none, can you please call the vote?
Director After,
Aye.
Director DeFreitas.
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg,
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Aye.
Director Teitler.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, you one more time, Chief Chicoine.
Hey, I'm here, so Kristen show.
The next business is action on approval of the Colorado ETRANs 2024 School District Resolution. Do I have a motion to approve the Colorado ETRANs 2024 School District Resolution?
I move that the board approve the Colorado ETRANs 2024 School District Resolution as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
We'll now move into discussion. Do you have anything you want to present on this one?
I think I'll just talk through it if that's okay.
Mhm.
And you can pull the reso, that's fine too. What this is doing is our initial board resolution was for $7.5 million is for the state loan program, which is the maximum that we would be able to borrow. And that was the initial estimate. And when this was due, this was even past due when I got in, and I didn't really have a time to really look at it. We believe we need more than that, is what we've discovered. And in talking to the state loan program, they said, well, we'll increase this to 15 million, but if you guys have to increase it again, this is a big increase for 1 year. And it really kind of goes in line, almost in step with all the questions and conversations we've been having with the other budget issues, as we've been utilizing this funding for self-insurance issue, for some of these other budget misses, for those losses in revenues, that this is some of that impact. But the reason why we were able to borrow or needed to borrow in the first place is really and solely about property taxes, because we collect those property taxes in March and June. And then we have to allow that, almost all of those property taxes in March and June. And then we have to allow that to continue the district throughout the leaner months when we don't get property tax. So that's the whole reason why we're borrowing. But part of this increase is because, I'm new, and that's the number we had when I first got here. And that the state loan program is not wanting us to go over 15 million because they think that's a big increase in 1 year. But we all know that there are some reasons, besides what we've been talking on self-insurance and those kind of things. There are other reasons for this, is because of what Director Teitler talked about earlier, about the increase in the percentage of property tax compared to the state equalization. As additional revenues as a percentage of our budget is paid for by property tax, we have more and more of this cash flow situation. So I just want to note, there's just a couple of things going on here, but I'm going to watch this very carefully, and I will be sure, and I know that Anna and I will be sure to talk about that frequently as well, and watch this. And if there's something else that we need to have a conversation with, you will know about it most likely in January. So on this, but we're hopeful that this will cover us through for this year, and then we'll continue to have some more conversation on it later.
Excellent. So Director Teitler, we'll begin with you with any questions on this.
I feel like I have got our questions answered, but I think one part that maybe is missing about why we're having to ask for this big state loan too is we just put all this money into Meadowwood also that we had sitting in our general fund also that was able to cover this in the years past.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Director Ramirez.
Nothing. Thanks.
Director DeFreitas.
No, just no questions, just again expressing my frustration with the irony that as our valley has become even more unlivable for many people due to property, the rise of property values, it has once again complicated our lives as a school district because those property values diminish the state contribution. And now we have these even larger gaps throughout the year waiting for those property taxes to come in, just for the record. So thanks.
And yeah, I would just, I think Director Tyler, you made a really important point that we spent down our reserves by 50% in order to fund Meadowwood. And so this has been a year where a lot has hit all at once. So I don't have any specific questions on this, though. I understand, and I'm appreciative the state has a program to help us balance this out. So are there any intervening motions to amend? Seeing none, can you please call the vote?
She said aye. Director DeFreitas.
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg.
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Aye.
Director Tyler.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Chief Chicoine. Okay, you're quite welcome. The next business is action on approval of the proposed academic calendars for the next 2 school years, 25-26 and 26-27. This is the second and final read. Do I have a motion to approve the proposed academic calendars for the next 2 school years, 25-26 and 26-27?
I make a motion. I move that the board approve the proposed academic calendars for the next 2 school years, 25-26 and 26-27.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll now have 2 minutes of discussion. We'll begin with Director After.
Yeah, not much to say beyond the conversation that we had in our previous meeting. Since this is the second read, I will just state for the record that as a member of this board, I would prefer to see us be in school more often for more days, and this academic calendar doesn't make any changes to the status quo in that regard. So I'd love to be part of conversations about that in the future. I think kids need to be in school more, and I recognize that the state of Colorado doesn't afford us the ability to do that very easily, but I think it's a grave misstep on the part of our state.
Director Ramirez.
I guess I'll just reiterate that I would hope that we would get into a cadence where we are approving budgets in a larger year span.
Calendars.
So that
Budgets or calendar?
Calendars.
Did I say
You said
Yes.
budgets.
Oh,
yeah.
that's hilarious.
Clearly on your mind. Clearly on your
Yeah.
mind.
Clearly, it's never not on my mind. Okay, calendars, because I think it's important for us to stay aligned with neighboring districts and to also set sort of the calendar for the valley. So again, I think it's important to reiterate that and appreciate the time of everyone who gave their time to be able to create these 2 academic calendars. So that's it.
Director DeFreitas.
Just a thank you to all those who put in the time and effort to do the best we could with what we had this year and get a calendar that was workable for everything. It was not easy, and I appreciate the commitment.
Director Tyler.
I too would like to thank the calendar committee. Having sat on that, I realize it's a very contentious at times committee. I also think from the survey that came out, it's telling that there's no more than 60% agreement on pretty much any question that was asked on the calendar, and that causes for a lot of back and forth that is hard to define where's the right place to land. So I think that's good work that was done by the committee. I do have one question, and that question is, what was the decision behind why it's pretty much in April, spring break 1 year, and then the end of March, as we have done in the past the other year and why the change from one year to the next?
That is such a good question. And I remember the conversation slightly about this and where spring break landed. There was consideration of testing windows.
Yeah, and also I believe that Easter is at a different time that year. And then PSAT, SAT, and CMAS. So it was a negotiation based on the constrictions because of that Easter holiday.
Okay. And then the other one that I guess is more of a question / statement. I don't know, maybe you'll give me some answer, Dr. Cole. When the calendar committee during that time, there was questions about a 4-day week. And that was brought up, and I saw maybe only just a sentence or two that talked about this, but it seems like that's a bigger conversation. And is there any talk about how to continue this conversation, or will there be this conversation, or is that an IBB committee question? And I appreciate personally that it was not done through calendar committee and that was the non-start there, because I don't think that is the right group of people. Well, I don't want to say it's not the right group of people, but I don't think it's the large constituency base that we need to make such a decision, and it needs to be in a bigger setting than that. And so is there any plans for having that discussion, as it seemed like something that over a couple of years has wanted to try to gain some traction, or at least have some conversation about it?
I think it's an interesting question. It does come up a lot, knowing that there are a significant number of rural small districts that have 4-day school weeks often the motivation around that is budgetary issues. And so the questions come up. I mean, it definitely came up in calendar committee and comes up during budget decisions and discussions. I would say, unless I receive different direction from the board, my current position on a 4-day school week is that when we are trying to center students and we are trying to really target the service of our emerging bilingual students, our students of color, and address the needs of that particular group of students, I have not seen compelling evidence that states that moving to a 4-day school week would align with our strategic goals. Are there interesting benefits and compelling reasons, maybe related to savings or work-life balance, that make that worth looking into? Sure. But if we're going to start with our priorities around student achievement, in particular students of color and emerging bilingual students, there's not strong evidence to support that. And I would say it would need to be incredibly strong, because the impact of a 4-day school week on our families is also profound. And so I currently do not think it is a high value of our staff or our community to spend time talking about a 4-day school week. That's my position on that. And so that's why I would say, unless I heard different direction from the board on that, or I would say significant arguments that are aligned to our strategic goals around particularly student achievement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have any specific questions about the calendar. I'm grateful for the work on the calendar committee, and I know that it is difficult. And I would agree with you, Dr. Cole, that as a board member, unless I heard some compelling arguments or was shown some compelling research showing that that is what's best for the students that we're charged with educating, that I would have a hard time making that shift to a 4-day work week. We have 5 minutes of open discussion. If anyone has anything else on the calendar.
I would just echo my colleagues on that as a board member.
Yeah. And echoing Director After.
And
More days in school.
more days would be good.
Can we do 6 days a week?
Director After just said that. I remember that. Anybody who's still tuning in, that did come out of her mouth.
14. All right. Can you please call the vote? Or wait, are there any intervening motions to amend the calendar? Seeing none, can you please call the vote?
Director After. Director DeFreitas,
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg,
Aye.
Director Ramirez,
Aye.
Director Tytler.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next business in order is board updates and appreciations. We'll begin with Director Ramirez.
Updates and appreciation. I guess I'll just start with the update that the board got to go to CASB, which was really important. I think for us to not only be there, be able to have our superintendent there, but to also be able to hit the different breakout sessions that were important for us to be at, you know, whether it came to finance or just prepping for the future. I think it was a really important opportunity. So thank you to our team for making that possible. I also got to attend the state's first Latino caucus, Latino elected legislators meeting at CU Denver at the School of Education, and I was really grateful to Senator Julie Gonzalez for the invitation. I think it is incredibly important, and I shared this with the team, for us to be in the ear of our state legislators and to be sharing our experiences that often get drowned out when a lot of the state conversations are happening in the Denver metro area. And I think for us as a rural school district that is kind of in this valley that is a rural resort town and is so dependent on each other, and we have our housing issues and we have all of the other issues that we're dealing with. I just think it's incredibly important for us to be able to be part of those conversations that are happening when it comes to how the state is budgeting, when it comes to how our legislators are advocating for us. And so I appreciated the opportunity to be there to represent the Roaring Fork School District and our Western Slope. And I look forward to hopefully hosting that group of electeds here in the coming future. I think that it would be an amazing opportunity, and I look forward to having more conversations with our team to see if we can make that a possibility. And that's it. And we have
Thanks.
our committees.
Director DeFreitas.
I did not get to go to CASB. I was wearing my other hat in Vegas, but I hope to very much next year. That's my other work had a conference in Vegas. The water hat. Go to bed, guys. I did get to go yesterday to the CMC trustees meet. and greet.
nice.
Good. Yeah, it was wonderful. They had great appetizers and some really wonderful cider. But mostly it was enjoyable. I got to meet Matt Gianeschi, the new president there. He was really great, and it was really nice to see them hiring someone who knows the district that they run so well, having been there for 10 years. He had wonderful things to say about Dr. Cole, that she'd reached out right away to find out how this relationship works and what we can do better as a district. And brought some interesting thoughts forward about more trade school opportunities and ways to partner in the Valley to potentially even some kind of hub of that kind of training that we don't have a lot of. So it's a great conversation, and I enjoyed getting to go.
Dr. Tytler.
First of all, I would like to give a shout out and thank you to the principals at Carbondale Middle School and the school for hosting a visit some time ago. I don't think I ever got to say thank you for that. It was right around the last time we met. Also want to say kudos to Principal Henschel at Roaring Fork High School. Last night I was able to go to one of her meetings, and I just appreciate the way in which she is transparent, is well versed, and was really opening to answering questions and not shying away from any difficult conversations and having an important schedule conversation. And so thank you there. And my BOCES role, we're looking for our new executive director. We've been working with the firm helping us come up with questions, getting ready to meet at the beginning of next month before our next board meeting to start solidifying what we're looking for and be ready to start interviews coming soon after that for the executive director. And then also, as far as housing goes, there's been a new home ownership opportunity that has been announced for Roaring Fork School District employees. Down in Glenwood, we have staff priority for 10 units of studios and 1 bedrooms that are available to staff. So if that's something that people are interested in, they should check the email that Chief Baumfock sent out about this opportunity to be part of the L3 building purchase in Glenwood through Habitat for Humanities. And then it's just as far as appreciations, I guess in this time with all of the turmoil that is roiling around for the uncertain future, I just want to say thank you again to teachers who are there consistently, much the same that Dr. Cole said in her appreciations to start us off, that I value the work that you do. I appreciate you being there every day, ready to go, and are not letting the outside noise affect what is happening in the classrooms. And also, just on the same note, just today I got a chance to spend time with about 10 high school seniors, and just all the work that all the seniors have been putting in through scholarships and applications, and so much writing and so many revisions in this last couple months. Great job to all those high school seniors.
Director After?
Thanks to the team here and Dr. Cole for going to Colorado Springs together last week. It was great to spend time with everyone. I wanted to share, and Jonathan, thank you for making all that happen. Really appreciate that. It's a good experience to talk to other school board members from across the state. I'd say probably the best session I went to was hosted by Greater Education Colorado, or Great Education Colorado, a advocacy group, nonprofit, that I think we'll probably be hearing from. So I wanted to give folks a little bit of a heads up on that. They have secured funding has been secured. This is what they shared for Colorado's first ever state commission school finance adequacy studies, which will provide research-based detail about the resources necessary to ensure the success of every Colorado student. And so I think we'll probably be getting material and content pushed out to us, them looking for our support in their campaign, which is going to be called Get It Done, a blueprint for student success. So I think we'll be hearing from them quite a bit in the next year or so. So that should be interesting as they try to increase funding from the state for education. So just a heads up on that. I missed the finance committee meeting on Monday. So thank you, Christy and Anna, for hosting one before Thanksgiving, since I knew I would be out. And I wanted to also thank my employer, because I was, am able to take like 3 days of PTO to go to CASB, which I think is a good use of my time, but maybe not so much for them. And then a shout out to my daughter's second grade teacher at Crystal River, Mr. Salvador Castañon, who hosted parents this morning. And it was really cool in particular because we got to hear the second graders read about fossils. And then there was a grandparent of one of the kids in the class who had spent her childhood going around with her dad, who is a paleontologist. And so she brought all these fossils for the kids to see. And it was a really cool little experience. And it was good to be in the classroom. And so thanks to the beloved Mr. C at CRES for making that happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Director Kohlenberg, before you go, I just wanted to add a couple more comments real quick about appreciations. Appreciations. I wanted to appreciate the board for, similar to what Director After said about, not only did they get work off, but you all taking work off to take time to go do this also as a volunteer role. And then also just the importance of being at CASB, of being able to connect with districts such as Eagle and Summit, who have so many of the same issues as we have, and to have that time to connect, and other people who are doing programming and facing large but emerging bilingual populations, and getting to have those discussions are really very, very valuable. So thank you.
We need to.
No. I need to be home at 9 o'clock. No. Um.
Sorry.
Updates.
Sugar rush.
Thank you, Director Tyler, for stepping in for the Health Insurance Committee last night. I was unable to make it due to childcare, and so Kenny was able to jump in a pinch and be there. And so I don't have specific updates from that committee beyond what we've heard a few times throughout the evening. Appreciations, I wanted to give a few different appreciations. I was late coming today because of the winter strings informants at Basalt Elementary. So I wanted to give a specific thanks to our partner, the Aspen Music Festival and School, who pushes into, I think, all of our schools. And has strings programs for our kids from second grade on up, along with guitar and choir and all of those wonderful opportunities for our kids. It was the first strings performance is great. And seeing the progression that they make year over year is incredible. And so the time and dedication of that staff, their donors, all of them is pretty amazing. And then along those lines, really wanted to give a shout out to all of our music educators and teachers as we head into winter performances and recitals and all that extra work and effort that it takes to manage not just one class, but the whole school when we're talking about these holiday recitals. And then when Director Apter was giving hers, it reminded me that since we didn't do appreciations the last one, and I wanted to give a shout out to Basalt Elementary, who hosted muffins and math in every grade and every classroom the week before Thanksgiving, where parents were invited in to have like breakfast and play math games with their kids. And the teachers did a significant amount of extra work and sent home little math games for all of the kids. And it was just a great way to really build community, and it really had a lot of people, they had a lot of people show up. So it was a great way to get people in schools. And thanks to all of you for time at CASB and time for being here, and Chief Chicoine, special thanks for all of the hard work that you are putting in right now. I'm sure it feels like it's never ending, but there must be an end in sight. I'm gonna end with that. There is an end in sight. There will be. So if there's no further business, no objection, this meeting will be adjourned. It is 8:42 p.m.